Have a wonderful class.
Thanks, Felicia. Hey guys, happy Friday, and welcome to our Czech crystal earrings party. I don't know if some of you have made it into your stores in the last week or so, and you've seen the new wall. It's the beautiful wall of crystal, and all new sizes and some additional colors in the sizes that were there before. So everything from a 4 millimeter bicone and a round all the way up to 8 millimeter now, which is very, very like opening for inspiration and patterns we can do. So we've got a ton of content coming your way, starting with today's class and then a bunch of other classes that just really incorporate crystal and new Czech glass. So today is an example of that. And what we're going to make today is just a bunch of earrings. The cool thing about these crystal strands is you get a lot of crystal on them. And if you want to make some earrings for your shop or for gifts for, we got the holidays coming up. So we got to start thinking about that. It's never too early. So this is a way to make a bunch of stuff that's very special. It's very high end. And that is a great gift that you can just get a lot from, like, just even one strand of beads. So I've got a bunch of concepts to share today to make it kind of fun. And what I've got on the mat here is just an example of the 4 versions of earrings that we're going to do. These are in no way comprehensive of the possibilities, obviously, but they're just 4 things I came up with that I think demonstrate some really cool wire concepts and some basics with head pins and eye pins. And those are, if you're new to jewelry making, they're kind of the staple way to create, fast jewelry. So showing here is some of the crystal strands that I used. So this is an 8 millimeter AB crystal. Beautiful colors. There's so many colors. I just grabbed some, bright standout ones. And I grabbed red because for anyone's thinking of holidays, we've got that here. And then these are 2 examples of some beautiful Czech glass. And I checked, and these are in my local Michael's now at both of the ones near my home. So they're findable. What we're going to use from these today, these are going to be used in a couple of our classes coming up. Like next week, for example, we'll do a necklace with just this strand and some crystal, but it has table cut rectangles on them. And they have this really cool swirly pattern. They're really similar between these 2 strands. And the one in the handout that's called out in the handout is this one. But if you can't find that one, there's also this one, which has the same little table cuts. They're slightly different color, but they're very close. So for the purposes of today's class, they'll both work. And the part number on that is the 107-19282. And then again, the one in the handout is this one. So you'll be able to find that code here. All that stuff is located on the very first page. Let me show you that really quick. Everything that I'm going to be using today is labeled right here, including the findings. So let's get those out and show them. And I also have not shown a couple of the other strands that I used because I have broken them up and have them handy here. There's a 6 millimeter and 8 millimeter Opalite, which is another Czech crystal, but it's like got a milky finish. And the reason I grabbed that is how cool does that look next to the milky on that? It's just so like little clouds of rain. So that's the design concept I was going for there. And then I also thought it looked really pretty with the ocean jasper. So here's some Czech crystal with that. And that's another earring design we'll do. But the sky's the limit. I mean, use what you've got on hand in the way of gemstones and Czech glass, and or go and find one of these strands and just go to town. All of these techniques will work with different beads. So they're super, super handy. So for the findings, the main essentials you're going to need are some head pins and some eye pins, and I'm showing them in 18 karat plated gold. That's an eye pin. An eye pin has a little open loop on it, and a head pin usually has a closed either ball or flat end, and that is handy for making the bottom of your bead. It just disappears, and so your bead is the focal, and that's all you really see. And if you're going for a design like that, it's really handy. And then, of course, an eye pin is handy because you want a loop at the bottom so you can suspend something else from below it. So we'll show doing that. And then I have handy also some tiny little jump rings. And these are 4 millimeter in size. And they give you the sway, the motion at the ear wire. So that's where I'm using those. You can kind of see them there. And then last but not least, we'll need ear wires. So I got those handy too. All right, and then I'm gonna pull in some 22 gauge wire. This is German style. You can use any color you want. I've got a bronze here because I thought it looked really cool with the chai glass. These colors just seem to be very, like, they went. But you could also just use a gold color. You could use silver. Anything you want to use is going to be fine. And 22 gauge, this is, there's wiggle room here. You could get away with doing 20 or 24. 22 is going to be the kind of the Goldilocks, right? The best one, but you could use the other sizes and it would still work. And let's see the tools, and I'll start with a ruler. I'm going to be measuring 1/4 inches a lot, and then I'm going to be measuring some lengths of wire. So I've got a ruler handy. Got something to cut wire and head pins, eye pins, flush cutters. These are a really good pair of flush cutters. And I put flush cutters in the handout. You're going to need some chain nose and round nose. So chain nose are those ones with a little point, but they're flat inside. See how they're flat in the inside? Round nose are going to be round all the way around. That's how you make your loops. And then I've got a pair of nylon jaw. So nylon jaw is really something you really need because you're going to use it to do the head pins and to kind of flatten and straighten out the wire, the lengths of wire that we're going to cut. Last but not least, I've got some bent nose and square nose. And those are just for jump rings. And it's just something I like to do. These are optional. If you, you can use chain nose to open your jump rings. Okay, that's everything. It's a lot of stuff, but these are staple items that you use over and over in your jewelry making. So once you've got a set of pliers, you've got everything you need. I'm going to start with the simplest one. And it is the single drop. Let's clear out this other stuff really quick. Let's make this one. And it doesn't seem like much, but you'd be surprised how many people would make this their first choice, because a lot of folks just want a simple sparkle to put on their ear. It doesn't hang down very long. It doesn't get in the way. And it's, I wouldn't call it minimalist, but it's not statement either. It's just everyday sparkle with like a t-shirt and jeans. This is your go-to thing. So this one right here, if you have a bunch of those in your shop for the holidays or you're giving them as gifts, they're going to be very loved. So, and all you need is one or a pair of crystals, right? So one per earring side. And again, here's the head pins. And this is this one right here. And the length on that, in case anybody's interested, is 1 inch. But you have wiggle room here. You can get away with other sizes. Just make sure it's at least 1 inch. And it's super easy. Just pop that on the head pin. And what I'm going to do, and just using my hands to do this, is I'm just going to fold this part forward around the bead. And to do that, you want to keep the head pin part flush. So hold that really kind of tight, right? And then let's just bend this wire down. Bend that forward. So you're going for that. And then we're going to trim this length right here so that the part from the bead to the end is 1/4 inch in length. And you can use your ruler for that. Eventually you'll just find like you can eyeball it. But about 1/4 inch is what I usually go for. And you can just lay it here. So it'll look like about that much. Trim that. And now you need your round nose pliers. So here's the round nose. And with this little end that's here, go ahead and put the end of it in between the two jaws of the pliers. And I kind of work towards, and all pliers are going to be a little bit different. Some of them are going to give you a loop that is smaller or bigger, and it's all going to vary based on where you are in the set of pliers. So if you work further back, you're going to get a bigger loop. If you work further up, you're going to get a smaller one. We've cut about 1/4 inch. So I'm going to work around what's essentially the 3mm loop area on my pliers. You'll get a feel for it. It's forgiving, so it doesn't have to be exactly perfect, but I'm working right about there. And if your pliers are a little bit bigger, just work a little further up, but you'll get a sense of it. And then what I'm doing now is I'm rolling while I'm holding the bead. I'm rolling the pliers forward to make that form a loop. And mine's not quite closed yet. You can see it's still a little bit open. So I'm just going to come along and just bring this in there, roll it a little more until it's closed. So that's what you're going for. You can take your chain nose pliers if you want to straighten it out just a little bit. So here's some chain nose and just flatten. You can even, it's a little tricky to do, but you can even kind of close it like by doing this. Sometimes it slips, so just be super careful and precise with it, but you can help close it a little bit with your pliers and make it look really good. So there's that. I'm going to go ahead and bring out now my square nose and bent nose, just because that's how I like to do my jump rings. So I'm grabbing a 4mm jump ring. Just going to find the seam on it. The seams can be tricky to find, but just look really closely at it. You can see kind of at the top there where there's a little spot. That's what we're going for. I've got that facing away from me and I'm gripping it with, this is where the square nose are handy because they hold more of the circle. And I get the bent nose over and lock right about there. And then you just want to use a lateral motion to open up. So you keep the circle, right? The circle stays good, but you've got that open. And just keep it on the pliers. And we'll put the charm on there. And let's just grab an ear wire really quick. We'll just dump those out. We're going to be needing lots of those. Just getting that back in the spot where it was. There's my ear wire. Get that on there. And let's close it up. So to close it up, we're just going to do a reverse of that same lateral motion. Making sure I got a good grip on it with that side. And if you can hear it, it's a little inaudible, but if you can hear that little click with the jump ring, and you can kind of work it back and forth against itself just a little bit, not too much, but see how I'm giving it a little wiggle? That's work hardening it and making it stronger. Super easy. And just do that 2 times and you've got a pair of earrings that is gonna probably be your favorite pair. Honestly, you'll put those on every day. The sparkle on this is really pretty. I don't know how much of it's coming across, but it's got some real glow to it. So yeah, so that's earring 1. And I wanted to show another little idea here. I found these on the Michaels wall next to the jewelry section. How cool. They just sparkle against that on the craft paper. These are little earring cards. You can just buy those and put them in a plastic bag. They sell the bags in the section where like the wedding save the date cards are. You can find them there and put the little pouches and set them on your craft table. So that is a really cool way to make a bunch of great jewelry. Let's do a version with 2. Okay, so I'm gonna grab the red now just for fun, just to change it up. And we're gonna do that same thing again. So if you wanna see this, the head pin rolly thing, we're gonna do that one more time. And then we're gonna take an eye pin and do this connector, make a connector with the top one, jump ring, ear wire, and we've got it. So we're gonna need 2 crystals and a head pin. Let's start with that one again. Get that on there. Bend it forward. Just like that. Trim it to a 1/4 inch. I'm going to eyeball it this time. And then I'm going to show another little trick in a second. But if you want to, you can save this piece that we just trimmed because you know all of your head pins are the same length. They're 1 inch. And if you were going to factory style make one of these, you could use that to measure your next cut. So if you put this on, fold it over, you could bring this on, kind of hold it to the end and trim it. And then you get the same length. So you can kind of create your own little measuring device by saving this clipping if you want to. Eventually, you'll find you don't even need that because it's something that you just, it's a skill that just comes very quickly for people. Like they can suddenly see that 1/4 inch just from knowing where it looks like on an 8mm bead. It's about halfway to this, the equator there, see? So that's just something that, you know, over time you'll develop that. Here's our round nose, get those going. And again, I'm working kind of toward the front of the pliers here. And another thing you can do is make sure it's flush here by touching the top of the plier. So you got the end of that flush with the round nose. And let's just roll it forward. You might need to adjust the plier back a little bit as you get close to the bead. Let's see if it connected. There we go. So there's our loop. I'm quite pleased with how that one came out. They don't always come out that perfect. It's nice. I'm gonna flatten that with my chain nose. And when I say flatten it, what I'm actually doing is I'm putting it in plane because sometimes my rolling forward isn't perfect. And what I'm looking for is for this to be a straight line. So sometimes you just need to bend your stone a little bit. Okay. Eye pin next. Let's get the crystal on the eye pin. And this is a little bit different length. Let me show you really quick. So our trick of using a little segment isn't going to work for this one until we create a new one for this one. This is a 1.5 inch head pen. So we're going to be trimming more off of this one. But again, I'm just going to show you the one way to eyeball it on an 8mm bead is once you've done that fold over, right about at the equator on that 8mm bead is a 1/4 inch. So you can use that trick for 8mm beads. It might not work as well for others, but that's kind of how I eyeball it. And then if I want, I can save that. And there's my 1.5mm measuring tool. So I've got one for each of my sizes there. Save it. All right, same thing. We're going to roll forward. Flush there. And we'll just roll it forward all the way until we make contact with the bead. And then I like to do this. This is a little an extra thing, but you notice how they're not, the sides aren't, you know, facing the same direction. So this one's bent down a little bit. So I'll grab the square nose and here's the chain nose. And then I'll just align them up like that. That's if you want to. So there's our connector. All ready to go. Got our bottom bead there. The cool thing about simple loops, why I like them, is they can be opened and closed to connect to each other really easily. And it doesn't matter which one. You can open either this one or you can open this one. I find it easier to open these because they are, there's something to hold on to on the other side, whereas this one is spinning more. So I might take this one and I'm going to choose which one is a little bit bigger and make that my bottom. This one looks like the one. So the seam, if you can see right here, the seam is located like right there. See the opening? And just like we did with the gem rings, I'm just going to open it like that. So that's open. Get our bead on there. And let's just close it back up. And if it looks like, you know, if you've got space there and that space bothers you a little bit, I feel like this is secure, like it's not going to come off. But if you really wanted it to be super, super closed, something you can do is grab your other pliers, secure one side, get these, put that back in plane, and then you can just kind of close it up. If you really need it to be perfect, you can do that. All right, so now I've got a jump ring. Square nose are still here. Seam looks like it's right there. So I'm just gonna pick it up so that my seam is facing away from me. It's a little easier. Bent nose pliers. we'll just lateral motion, open up that jump ring. Hook on to the top there. And the reason I use a jump ring instead of going direct is I feel like these have just a little bit more sway to them. And it gets the bead a little further down from the earlobe. So that's why I did that. Just wiggle that closed. And I think I could do a little bit better job there. So let's make that a little better. All right, that's pretty good. Yeah, that's good. Okay. So there's our earrings. Perfect little pair of earrings there. They have lots of wiggle, lots of sparkle. And those I'm going to set over here. And now let's do something a little more complicated. So far we've only been working with head pins and eye pins, and those are a product that you can find, on the findings wall. Again, they look like this, but you can also do your own from wire. So if you had just a whole pack of wire and you wanted to just make one, and this is something that I learned from Meredith Roddy and Sarah Lovecraft, and this is their knotted head pin that they do. And so knotted head pin alert. I think I saw Wanda here earlier. So this is one of the really fun techniques that I love making these. They're super cool. There we go. I was looking for that in the chat. And so that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to make one of those just to see it. And for this one, I'm going to cut about, let's see, about 3.5 inches or so. Because we're going to be doing a lot. We're going to make a coil, and then we're going to make a wrap loop on top. And we're going to use, in this case, an 8mm opalite crystal. And I didn't show you guys those very much, but they're that milky color in 8mm. So let's grab one of those. And the pair we're making right now, grab those, put them somewhere. Here we go. We're making this one really quick. So the part we're going to start with is this little head pin here. All right, so I'm going to need my flesh cutters first, and I'm going to need my ruler. Let's get that over here. Let's start and get about 3.5 inches right there. Okay, and I'm gonna grab those nylon jaws. Remember those earlier? If anybody's new to nylon jaw pliers, these are pretty cool. You hold one end and you grab your chain nose pliers, just something to hold on to, right? And then just run the nylon jaw over it. They're a soft interior, so, well, not super soft, but they're soft compared to the wire itself. And so just making it nice and flat, so easier to work with if we do that. And so here's some round nose pliers. Yeah, I love the rule. I like rulers for wire. They're easier because if you're using like a tape measure, it's harder for me to make them stay flat while I'm trying to work. So I do love a ruler. And I'm going to go ahead and work with the end that I flush cut earlier. So that's here. It's in the pliers. Again, I'm just kind of working toward the front of the plier. I'm going for about something between 2mm, 2.5mm in diameter for my loop size. Sorry about that. All right, so let's make a couple of coils. And to make a coil, you're just going to go around. So I'm just bending this around. When you get to the spot right here, where you're about to connect with the other side, try to go just a little bit under it. See that? And then spin, keep spinning around. I just crossed my tail one extra time. And right about there, where you're seeing 3 coils and you've got your end. Let me show that a little better. Go ahead and pull the pliers out. So there's 3 little circles, right? It looks like that from this side. Take this end and bend it gently around your finger. You don't want to give it a strong bend. This is something we're going to have to straighten later, so be gentle with it. And then get that through. That's through there. It'll happen. It'll work. It's a little tricky, but you can get it. Pull it down as much as you can with your fingers. Eventually, you'll reach a spot where it's just kind of looks like that. And this is where we're going to do chain nose assist with our nylon jaw. So grip that right here. And hold this with the nylon jaw. And then pull down and hope that it comes through. And it takes a little strength. I'm pulling kind of hard, but eventually you'll get a little knot there at the bottom. And I'm going to just straighten out this top part. Sometimes if I need a lot of extra strength, I might bend the pliers kind of at the top. Go ahead and just trim that off. It's not going to straighten out for you. So you can just trim that. And now we just made our own head pin. And here's my crystal, 8mm. Get that on there. It gives it a really cool little look at the bottom. I've always liked it. It's kind of a rustic, like a boho look to it. And so I'm going to show now a wrap loop. So this is a little different than the simple loops, but it kind of starts with doing the same, almost the same, only you don't do the little 90-degree bend in the beginning. You bend that over the plier to give you some space for the wrap. And then you create the loop and then you wrap that tail and trim. So how that looks is we've got it without doing that bend that we did with the head pins. Remember, we're just going to keep it straight. Get the round nose, bring those here, and just kind of place them toward the front of the plier. Bend forward 90 degrees. And then what you'll need to do is adjust the position of your plier, because what we want to do is take this side now and make a loop with it. So to do that, I'm going to make that loop over this part of the plier. So what you want to do is just go ahead and rotate it, what's essentially like a 45 degrees. And so it'll be like that. Next to, and my camera height isn't allowing me to get this to look, but so that's kind of what you're going for. And now what we're going to do is take this side and bend it over the top. And as you do that, if you want, you can kind of work down the plier a little bit, meaning I moved it down just a little bit to make my loop just a little bit bigger. I wanted the loop to be a little bigger than the height. So you'll get to a spot where you can't go anymore. You'll get stuck. Just go ahead and move those pliers another 45 degrees and keep going with moving that tail. And you'll get something that looks like this. I'll try to hold it so you can see. And actually I'll take it off so you can see it. And so right now it's kind of, do you notice how it's kind of to the side? I have an extra step that I do right before I take it off the pliers usually. And that is to go ahead and give a spin to it. So holding secure here, I'll move the bead itself a little bit. And that puts the loop a little bit more centered. So that's what we're going for there. And then the thing I like to do is I'll grab my chain nose then, and I'll pinch that loop because that's preserving my circle that we just made. And I'm just going to wrap this around. And this wire is pretty soft, so I can just do this with my hand. If you need help, you can always use a plier here to help you. Let me show you. Help you move it if you need to. Sometimes especially if it's short, it can really help to do that. Get it around. But basically what you're going for is a little coil there. Let's trim this part. So being really careful not to cut the coils. I'm gonna trim right here. And then hold the loop again. Here's some chain nose. I'm using square nose to hold the loop. Chain nose, and I'm tucking the tail here. Let's just push that down. All right. So that one's ready to go. We've got our little charm made. So the next thing we want to do is create this really pretty spirally connection for the top. And this is all here, so you don't have to memorize any of these numbers. But the first thing we want to do is cut a 5-inch piece. And then we're going to work with the bottom 1.5 inches. And the reason for that is we're going to do a loop at the bottom where we capture that charm we just made. And then we have room still on top of that to do all the fancy stuff with the table cut rectangle. So let's start with the 5 inches. Get that wire back, get the ruler back. And same thing again, I'm just gonna find the end. Bring that here. Trim that. Let's get those nylon jaws back. All right. So with the bottom 1.5 inches or so, so like right here, I'm going to get the round nose pliers. And we're going to use those to kind of work that way. It's a little better to make our first little part of the loop. So taking the short end, you want to work with the shorter end. This is about 1.5 inches right here. Bend that forward on your plier. So now we've got 90 degrees. And we got to do that same thing again, what we're doing over the bead, where we rotate the plier 45 degrees or so that you can get the tail. Sorry about that. It's wiggling on us. Get the tail around. And you'll reach a spot, you'll reach a spot where it can't go anymore. So you just move the pliers again. And then it'll let you continue to bring that around. And then I kind of adjust the loop there. So you're going for that at the bottom of your cut of 5 inches. And so there's our loop. Let's grab that little, and I always forget to do this. I sometimes finish my wrap loops here without putting on charm. Jump rings can save you there, but if you can remember and do it here, and it can save you a jump ring, especially since my wire, I would have to make wire jump rings to match it. And so I just brought that on. Little dangle there. And now we're just going to finish that wrap loop. Same way we did before, where you want to preserve the circle using your chain nose. And then just give it a wrap around. And you don't need too many, just like 2 will do, because we're going to be covering this. I'll show you in a minute. With the rectangle, we're going to come back this way and cover it a little bit. So just got 2 loops on there. I'm going to flip that around, trim the tail. And let's flatten it down. All right. So we've got a wrapped little loop at the bottom. We've got our knotted head pin with an 8mm Opalite crystal. Everything's ready to go. Let's find that table cut bead. It's right here. Okay. So we're just going to bring that on. And now for the fun part. A couple things I like to do if you're wanting to be a little bit of a perfectionist is locate which one is the front. The front's the one where you didn't have that little tail. We didn't cut this side. So I'm deciding that this is going to be my front. And I'm going to take those round nose and then just place them right above that. So the front side's over here. Here's my round nose. Bend that forward. It's that 90-degree thing again. This is going to be a wrapped loop. So bring that up 45 degrees. Start bringing that around. When I get to right about here, I move it down the plier just a little bit so I can make my loop a little bigger. Keep going. You'll reach that spot where you can't go anymore. So again, you're going to need to adjust your plier so that you can complete the circle around. Just like that. And then just going to adjust. You can hold the bead and adjust it. You'll get something that looks like that. And here's the bottom. That's still the front there. All right, so fun part. Again, securing this part of the loop that we just made. What we'll want to do now is going to make another wrapped loop. So go around once and twice and keep coming around. So normally we would stop here and we would trim it back here, right? And then flatten it. But instead of doing that, and notice there's a little bit of room, not a lot, but just a little. That's okay. We want that little bit of space because we're going to need it down here. Push your stone up. And then I kind of just like hold it. So we want to hold this so that it stays kind of facing forward. Bring that wire over the front of the stone. Just like that. Much as you can. And this is all adjustable later, but just as best you can, just kind of get it to stay like that. Bring that across over the front, and then just hold everything right here. Hold the wire in front of it, hold the loop at the top with your thumb and your finger. And then we're just going to take this and kind of encourage it to coil around the bottom. There's a little space there. And remember, we decided this was going to be the back, so I'll bring this around one last time. Let's trim it. Trim it like right there. And find those chain nose. Let's just flatten that down. There we go. Okay. All right. So a couple things that might happen if you do that, because you're using a lot of strength on the wire, is you're going to end up with, Saturn's rings not being exactly parallel with the table cut. So just go ahead and pinch one side. In fact, I think I'm going to use the square nose on this side because I have more room. And then down here, I'm going to take the chain nose, get on there. And I'm going to try to make them align. I might have to do that one by one, actually. There we go. So that one, they're going to be, every single time you do this, they're going to be a little bit different, but close enough. You just want to kind of get it to coil like that and practice it. Practice as much as you can. The back will be like open, clear, and the front will have like that little look to it. So then you just need an ear wire. I'm going to use my chainless pliers just to open the seam on an ear wire. I want to show that too, so you can do that. You could put a jump ring, but this one, I kind of want the table cut to continue to face forward. So I skipped doing the jump ring on this one. And I'm going to put this on this way so that that's the front, right? So this one, since it's not a round shape, since it's got something decorative that I want to be the front, that's why I skipped the jump ring, because you get just a direct connection like that. So that's going to look really cool on. I'm going to show you guys over here. We have one last earring to make. How cute is that? Nice little gift set too. All right, so let's get the last ones out. For the last ones, I switched to some 6mm crystal. And we're gonna need 2 of those. And that's these 6mm Opalite Czech crystals there. And then we need a gemstone. So here's the ocean jasper that I was showing earlier. And I picked one of my favorites, this little pretty one here. It's got some really nice dimension to it. And I didn't, really labor over it, but I did kind of try to match their striation and color because they tend to have some variation in hue. So these were really close to each other. And yes, we're going to need one more 8mm opalite crystal. So we're going for that. So super quick, I need to make a head pin. So we did this already. but I'm just going to make one more, bringing that on. Bend that forward, and I saved my 1-inch cheat sheet here, so you can use that for your 1/4-inch trim if you want. I just wanted to be able to show that other idea. The ruler works great, but if you like this, it's another neat idea you can try. Just using that to measure. So we've trimmed that same amount. And let's get the round nose and bend those forward. Let's go like right about there. Okay. Just keep going forward on your pliers. Straighten that up. Sometimes they just work. And sometimes the pliers get on me. There we go. So that one worked out great. And last but not least, show you the next page here. This one, we're gonna need 7 inches because this has a lot of spiraling going on. So let's cut that 7 inches. All right, so I'm gonna hold this here and just bring that down to the end. Let's see. Where did that go? Right about there. And I'm definitely gonna want to straighten this out with my nylon jaw pliers. Let's grab those. Some pliers. Right. And the next thing I'm going to want to do is kind of the same thing we did before. You want to do that 1.5-inch bottom where you make another wrapped loop. So it looks like this. Let me show you. Right now it's covered up with what's going to be coming down from the top. This is the same concept we did with the table cut just a moment ago, but we're just going to make another wrapped loop here for the bottom. So again, measuring, roughly 1.5 inches from the bottom of the piece we just cut, and then get those round noses on there. And we're just going to make a loop. So bend forward, bring it up 45 degrees, bring that around 45 degrees, finish that. We've got our loop. And I'm not going to bring on the charm yet because I can open this later and it'll be easier to do this work without having this dangle on there. But if you really wanted to and you could do it now. This opens, so we're going to just wait. And grab the chinos. Let's just coil that. So just 2 there. Just straightening everything out. Just get that coil there. Let's trim it. My flush cutters keep hiding from me. Here we go. Got that. And where are my square nose? Okay, so there's that. So once you've got that done, we're going to bring on all 3 of our beads. Let me clear this off really quick. So let's go 1. And grab the other one here. Okay, get this one. And 1 more. Okay, so you got 3 of those. And again, I'm kind of looking at it to say, like, okay, so that's the front there because the tail was cut on that side. Not essential, but if you want to, you can pay attention to those little details. And again, just going to put that on the plier kind of toward the end. Bend forward. So we've got that at about 90 degrees there. And then bring the pliers up and start making that loop. Slide it down just a little bit. Finish that loop. My wire's hitting my camera, sorry. Okay. 45 degrees there to finish the rotation. And you should have something that looks like that. So almost there, we're almost done. I'm gonna grab the chain nose again, holding this one. Let's go around once. So it's just regular coiling. And twice. All right, and so this is where you would normally trim or wrap a loop, but we're gonna keep going. We're gonna go around the front of that stone. And at this point, you can probably just hold it. And then go kind of like in between them. See the back here? We're just going in between. Come over the front. And again, going in between the stones at the back. And one last trip around the front of that crystal. So you get this little curly cue, really decorative, really pretty. And you get to the bottom, just hold everything and try to coil that around once. And we'll go for, I'm going to use my square nose here just to kind of secure it. Let's get one more on there. I want that to be kind of tight, so I'm pulling a little bit. Okay. And let's get those flush cutters going here. Let's press that down just a little bit more. Okay. All right, once you've got that, you can just go ahead and flatten. It's not gonna always flatten directly down as much because it's on top of a lot of stuff. This one is a thicker one. But it's good enough, you know, just so it's not sticking out. And let's do that thing where we straighten out the top so it kind of matches. We want that to be in plane like that. Roughly like that. Yeah, okay. All right, so we've got our charm. We've got an ear wire. We just got to put all that together. So chain nose, let's grab this part right here. Finding the seam on that loop that I made earlier. I'm just going to do like that lateral motion to open it. Bring that on. And then closing that part there. Got that nice and connected. And let's figure out what our front is. So this is the front part. So I want my ear wire to go like that. So again, I'm skipping the jump ring because I have a front that I want to highlight. I want it to spin as much. And there we go. Okay. So that one came out really pretty. I like that one. I'm just going to pop those on a card. Love these. So this is my favorite pair, obviously. My favorite one. I think it's just because I really like making those spirals. Those are really soothing and kind of fun to do. If you're ever feeling stressed out, just make a bunch of spiral gemstones. They're really fun. And then with that opalite, I'm loving the ocean jasper because it kind of just pulls it out. All the little white that you have in between the brown and the turquoise. It's not coming over on the camera as much in real life. Just looking at my screen, but it's really cool looking. So definitely try this. Again, what I used are, everything's in the handout, but the crystals and all the Czech glass strands. The Czech glass one that is highlighted here, the designer Czech glass strand in marble, the 280, that's this one. And that has the table cuts that we use today. They're just a little bit whiter. If you can't find this strand, because this is all brand new at the store, there's another strand you can use that has a really, really close color. And that's this one. And it has the same, it actually has a bunch of those table cuts. So if you want to get more table cuts, that one actually has more. And again, the part number on that is the one unity out of one here, 10, and then 719282. So it's basically the same number here, but just 282 instead of 280. So hopefully you can find one of these and you'll have everything you need. And we do have also a video out that you can check out that shows something that you can do with this strand. And I'm wearing it right now, and it's a macrame. There's a new cord at Michael's, and you can make this really cool macrame bracelet. The cord looks like this. Let me show you. It's micro macrame cord. And we just launched a video. Oh, so Wanda's saying she just watched that. Yeah, we're really excited about this cord. We're going to be doing a lot of fun stuff with it. So if you want to check that out, that's part of the new stuff at Michael's that you can see that they've got going. And next week when you guys join us, I'm going to have my wall redone behind me. So that's going to have all the new crystal and the new Czech strands and some of the new cord and new fun things. So the next time we have, is there, yeah, you can have old wall. Actually, we should probably do some giveaways with my old wall someday. I'll talk to the John Bead folks after this. We'll figure out something because yeah, my house is like a bead explosion, guys. It's crazy. All right. And so I want to tell you about next week because next week's special. Next week is really special classes. We have two Michael's classes next week. It's World of Jewelry Making. And be sure to check out all of the classes because there's the Beadalon folks are back too next week to do the World of Jewelry. But I'm teaching this crystal sparkle. And this is on Tuesday. And it's an hour earlier than we usually have class. It's for me 11 Pacific. So I believe that is 1 o'clock Central, 2 o'clock Eastern. That's when we're doing this on Tuesday. You can find all of these at michaels.com/classes, but just pay attention to the weird times. This is the launch for World of Jewelry Making for John Bead. We're going to be showing all these cool sparklies. And then we have another class on Saturday next week. That one's going to be really cool. It uses this strand and it uses this cord. And we'll be putting that together with some crystal in between. So check that one out. And then I'll show you more stuff next week. I should have all my samples ready to go by then. So yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Maria, saying thank you in the chat. Yeah, thanks, guys. So I just want to wish you a great weekend, and I will see you earlier next week. I get to see you on Tuesday, and I'm looking forward to it. So in the meanwhile, happy beading. Have a great weekend, and lots of love to you guys.